First, I'd like to thank Director Arnold and Chair Penley for their wisdom in allowing the audit team to clean up today. We are always like to think of ourselves as the main event. So with that comment, I would like to welcome everyone to the May 27th, 2021 meeting of the Audit Committee of the Arizona Board of Regents. Suzanne, can you confirm we have a quorum, please?
Yes, Chair Shipman, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And as a reminder, remember that public portions of this meeting are being recorded to aid in the preparation of the minutes. We're scheduled to adjourn at 5 o'clock, and with all of your help, we will reach that. There are key items on our agenda for today. We're going to review correspondence from the Auditor General. We're going to review the Internal Audit Review Board and the Chief Auditor reports. And we'll be reviewing and approving the internal audit plans for FY22. Finally, we will end an executive session for a review of assignments with our chief auditors. Are there any questions? Our first order of business is the approval of minutes, which are the executive committee session minutes from November 5th, 2020, and the public session minutes from April 1st of 2021. The November executive session minutes were reviewed by members during our April executive session, and no questions or changes were offered to Rick by the members. The April public session minutes were provided to you in today's agenda book. Are there any questions or corrections regarding the April public session minutes? Seeing none, I move the Audit Committee approve the minutes of the November 5th, 2020 executive session and the April 1st, 2021 public session. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. I'd like to ask Rick to lead us on item 2, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Monday, the 24th, the Auditor General distributed to Regents their letters announcing the beginning of the next year's financial audits. The full-time equivalent student enrollment audits. Unfortunately, the letters came in too late to get them in the book, but we'll get it in the minutes here, and the letters will be in the next book at the next meeting. There are 4 documents in the executive summary for agenda item 2 for the Auditor General today. 3 documents relate to the financial auditors officially announcing the start of the audits of the universities for 2021. The 4th document closes out the performance audit of the university's fee setting processes. We're all happy about that, I'm sure. The auditors are satisfied that all of their improvement opportunities were resolved and have been implemented, and no further follow-up is planned for that audit. Good job, everybody. Since we don't have any new reports issued from the Auditor General's office, we didn't invite him to come and speak today. However, I did ask the Financial Audit Director, her name is Donna Miller, you've all met her before, to give me some information that I could give to you about the upcoming financial audits, just to let you know where they're at. Now, I hope you can stay with me on the dates because it was a little confusing when I was putting it together, but I think I got it straight here. The university's financial and federal compliance audits for fiscal 2021 are starting already, despite the U.S. Office of Management and Budget extending beyond March 31st of 21 of the single audit deadline for the 2020 audit. So last year's single audit has been delayed out into the future here. The deadline for the 2020 audits was first extended from March 31, 2021 to June 30, 2021, and then again now to September 30, 2021. So the pandemic has really created a lot of problems. Because of that extension, the state's June 30, 2020 single audit report is delayed and is expected to be issued at some point during the summer of 2021. Normally it's around March timeframe. As we all know, the results of the university's federal compliance audits are reported in the state's single audit. That's the audits of the grants and contracts from the federal government that our universities have. The Auditor General and the state hope the single audit report to be issued not too far past June 30, but they don't have a more exact date just yet. For the fiscal year 2021 financial audits, there are no new reporting or auditing standards that would have any impact on our university's financial audits or report. No significant impact anyway. For the federal compliance work, the Auditor General plans to audit these following three areas: the research and development clusters, the higher education emergency relief COVID monies, the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund, state monies provided to the universities by the governor's office for expenses related to universities incurred because of the pandemic. The auditors hope to complete their fiscal 21 federal audit work by March of 22. Told you there's a lot of dates in here. As they learn more about the state's total federal dollars spent in fiscal 21, there may be other university federal programs that will need to be audited, so we'll hear about that at appropriate time. The good news is the fiscal year 21 financial reports for each university are still expected to be issued on time during the fall, as they have normally been in the past, typically late October, early November. CFOs can dispute that if that's not correct. At this time, the U.S. Office of Management and Budget has not issued an extension for the state's fiscal year 21 single audit, but with the extended deadlines to September 30 for fiscal 20 reports, the auditors believe that it's possible there could be an extension to June 30, 22 for the 21 single audit. Mr. Chairman, thankfully, this concludes the report on Auditor General activities. I'm happy to address any questions.
Any questions for Rick? Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Rick and Director Arnold for taking a look at the audit program and the conduct of our meetings and rearranging it a little bit. If those of you that took the time to review the book, you'll find that we've made changes to focus on three primary areas. First, we want to always review the progress the internal auditors are making in completion of their audit plans. Sounds simple, but it's something we want to talk about every time we get together. We also want to review the status of recent audits completed and the related findings and recommendations that resulted. And always we want to know, what's the status of outstanding remediations? Audit business is sometimes lengthy and carries on for months and even years. And seeing the new data presented in the book made me keenly aware that these are the right questions for us to ask, and it'll be interesting to engage our auditors and our IARB chairs in a discussion today. We've combined those two reports now to be a joint presentation. The chair, the IARB chair, will comment on the activity reports, followed by the chief auditors presenting the activity reports themselves. This joint meeting will be beneficial. Each time an auditor presents the audit, the CFO will immediately follow and comment on what we learned from the audit and how the university will benefit or improve as a result of the findings. At each audit, as each audit is presented, the chief auditors will comment on the key reasons for the audit, key risks addressed during the audit, the findings, and the remediations. We also added a new first page in the written chief auditors reports with charts highlighting the status of products on the audit plan and activity related to remediation of audit issues. I would urge members of the committee to take a look at this in the board book. If you haven't had a chance to do so, you'll see some of it today. On the executive summaries for the IARB and chief auditor reports, we added the number of red, yellow, and green issues for each of the internal audits being reported to help focus the conversation. So at this time, I and the staff would appreciate hearing from the committee members regarding their thoughts or comments on these changes, if you have any to share with us, and any other ideas that you have for improving the way we conduct our meetings. Is there anyone who would like to comment?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Rick.
I would like to make a comment, sir. Thank you. I just want to alert the committee that during the process of preparing those first pages for each of the universities, there's a couple of charts at the bottom of the page that represent agings of the improvement opportunities that are outstanding that the clients still need to work on and complete. During the exercise of putting together this first page, we came to realize that all three universities are measuring the outstanding findings differently. So I just want to alert you to that so we don't get into conversation, because some of you, I'm sure, have probably noticed some anomalies that would explain. The auditors, after the audit committee meeting, will be getting together and come up with a solution before the next audit committee meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I think the question of aging and how they're being dealt with will be a great opportunity for us to engage with the teams at each university so we can better understand how you're managing this very complex set of audits and the follow-up, which is often quite lengthy. So agenda items 3, 4, and 5 are the new joint IARB and CAE reports. Let's get started with NAU first. That'll be followed by University of Arizona second and ASU third. So let me turn it over to Bjorn and Mark Rupert.
Thank you, Chair Schupman. And Mark is here to join me as well. So as you can see in the IARB report for NAU, we had one meeting to review the report that Mark will talk about, and I'll follow up as directed with learnings. We also had a discussion on the audit plan, and you'll also take a look at that audit plan. We had feedback, and Mark will talk about that, from the executive team here at NAU, specifically on the audit plan options. And I would just comment that there were a couple that were very unanimous in terms of options, and Mark will talk about those. So we've had the one meeting focusing on the one audit plan being the other particular significant activity since the April meeting. We are making progress on the audit plan, and I think for this year, as in the audit plan for next year, I think has some particularly good items for the committee to review and improve. So I'll stop there, see if there's any questions. Otherwise, I think Mark will be able to join me and offer commentary on the audit itself, and then I'll follow up with some learnings.
Outstanding. Mark?
Thanks, Regent Schumann and Bjorn and committee. So I'll start with our current audit plan, the fiscal 2021 plan, which we believe is progressing well. We expect it to be fully completed by the end of summer. In the next month, we should be issuing our financial aid and Itgc security audits. And then we have an outstanding item from FY20, which is a compliance risk assessment. That's essentially done. It'll probably take the summer to vet that with all key stakeholders before we finalize the report. So you'll see that issued over the summer. The two final planned audits, eCert, which deals with management of conflicts of interest, and then unfunded research here at NAU, are heavily into field work, and we expect those reports also to be issued by the end of the summer. We've also set in plan a place for completing our fraud risk assessment process. That's something we decided early on would be a long-term process, and that will extend in the fiscal 22. You'll see that in the fiscal 22 budget, in the fiscal 22 audit plan. Any questions on status?
Seeing none, proceed.
Thank you. So we issued one report since the April 1st committee, which is the Shadow IT Audit Part 2. So just as a reminder, we define shadow IT as the use of information technology related hardware, software, and services by any member or function of the NAU community without approval, knowledge, or support of the NAU ITS and existing outside of NAU's selected internal control framework. So the goal of the shadow IT audit in general, part 1 and 2, was to ensure policy, procedure, and practice were in place to support minimizing challenges, risks related to shadow IT. They are generally can be summarized as protecting loss of sensitive and protected data and the related consequences that might come from that, such as regulatory fines and so on, potential unnecessary downtime and loss of productivity, and then unanticipated resource needs if we have to deal with a business disruption that is caused by or related to shadow IT. So we presented part 1 of that audit in October 2019. And that original part 1 focused on the policy and procedure component of trying to minimize and address shadow IT. Part 2, our primary focus was really on the practice side. What's happening at NAU, and can we identify whether we have major concerns around notable instances of shadow IT? Unfortunately, we did not find any notable instances. The big issue we identified was the use of cloud services predominantly, and those like Google Docs, if you heard of them, or Dropbox. So NAU has business versions of these that are available to folks, but folks can have their own, and that's hard to control. You can get your own cloud accounts. They're free in most cases. And we did identify situations where faculty and staff may be forgetting and using their personal versions versus their NAU versions. And I was very happy to say that most understood the issues and the risks, and we're going to work on trying to avoid making that mistake, so to speak, and certainly using that. There is a full list of the types of services we identified that we categorized in that shadow IT category at Exhibit B of the full report. And in terms of improvement opportunities, nothing red, nothing significant, but it's really more of a maturation of what they started back when we issued part 1, which is more network scanning. They implemented a new data survey process. In fact, we piggybacked on that to help identify shadow IT by following the data, just like you would follow the money in a financial audit or investigation. We followed the data. And the goal was to expand that data survey to capture research areas where we think the higher risks are in terms of folks being able to purchase and implement their own systems. And management is working on improving those along with training focused on shadow IT. So if there's any questions on shadow IT, happy to answer those. See.
Does anyone have any questions on the shadow IT? Does everyone understand it? It's a very difficult area to, I think, to control. Chair Penley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks very much, Mark, for conducting this kind of audit. I still recall back in 2015 and 2016 when President Chang really began to alter IT at NAU rather considerably, improving the security of IT and really providing additional services to faculty and staff through centralization. So to see these results from your shadow IT audit is really, I think, a good thing for security at NAU. It's also just a compliment to you, President Chang, and to everyone who has worked so hard to achieve this result at the university. So good news. Thanks very much for doing the audit, Mark.
Thank you, Regent Penley.
I agree. And the fact that you had a shadow IT audit and didn't find any red areas is actually quite remarkable, because it's so easy for someone to set something up not using the institutional methodology, but just going out and grabbing it off the net like most of us do on our own. So well done. Do you have more to report?
Just to agree on that, although I do caution, we did not look under every rock. You know, we did
a lot of rocks.
We looked at a lot of rocks. We followed data survey. We did a lot of interviews, but we did not necessarily look every possible place. But we do feel good about it. And I think, as Regent Penley noted, the centralization of IT, which is certainly a lot easier given the size of our organization, definitely contributed to our ability to control that much better. So the last aspect of the required or the new reporting relates to the aging. And I know we wanted to focus on those items that are aged over 1 year. We have 15 items in that category. And I'll just cover this sort of in a summary basis. In general, all of them relate to one or more of three key factors, which is the impact of COVID, employee turnover, or the fact that we have been implementing a shared services model, which has affected a lot of the processes that we do around finances and in the HR areas, and to some extent, the research areas. So for example, one of the oldest ones from 2015 related to loss prevention and building and other emergency plans. From the point of that audit, we are on our third emergency manager. And Mr. Church was put in place about a year before COVID and made a lot of progress. And then COVID hit. And as you can imagine, in that position, he was pretty much dedicated to COVID work, but expects to have this done in the coming months. In fact, all 15 right now look like they should be done somewhere between July 1st and December 31st. So we feel pretty confident in that regard that things are moving as they should or can under the circumstances.
So we've had open items for 6 years in that space.
Right.
And one of the things I like about this new format is I was completely unaware of that, just because we weren't asking the right question. And is there a limit to the way, how long you will allow these to go before they need to be reviewed for just maybe elimination and restructure, and maybe Bjorn could answer that. I can't imagine having something hanging over you for 6 years like that.
So Chair Schuman, that's a good question, and one Mark and I have talked about just in terms of how we report on that. Our reporting process right now for those outstanding items does track when things are proposed to be implemented by. And if there's a push of that date, we want to be able to track how many times and how far into the future those items are pushed. Some things do get pushed out, especially if it's a larger system implementation that is recommended, because that does take time and resources to do. Mark provided a good example for the turnover and COVID for our longest item, but in terms of how long those go, it is on our radar, and we try to evaluate really truly what is influencing any adjustments in dates that need to be followed up on for full implementation. So we try to get these all of them implemented by the time that they were originally set to be implemented.
I appreciate that. I think just from a standpoint of running a program, allowing things to age to that degree, in my mind, would be problematic. And at some point, I would think extra resources need to be put against it, or the whole audit needs to be reviewed for what's realistic to accomplish. I'm surprised that our state auditors haven't slapped you on the wrist for having something open for 6 years, but they haven't, so that's good. But I would highly suggest that you consider ways to set reasonable limits on how far, and this is for all three universities, how long you allow something to drag on before action's taken. I think that is not in the best interest of good management. Okay, anything else on the aging, Mark?
No, unless there are other questions, and nothing else on the report unless there are questions, or if I missed something.
Regent Schutman?
Yes.
I wanted to follow up on your comment about the items being open for an extended period of time. And I'm wondering if it isn't worth at this point, I'm just wondering how pertinent a report would be that was started 6 years ago with 3 different people, and whether it's not worth going back and looking at the open items that are perhaps older than a year and determining whether we even put the effort and the manpower into finishing those, as to whether they would even be pertinent at this point in time. I know that our auditing groups are not overstaffed. And so my question would simply be, is it really worth finishing those, or is it worth perhaps putting them somewhere again on the future chart to do in the next year or two, given that we wouldn't have completed it in the last 6 years.
Would it be safe to say, I think Regent Manson, you're exactly right. Would it be safe to say that if you have it to a stage where you've identified red or yellow areas, that you would certainly want to address those critical risk elements before you abandon the entire thing? But what I don't quite understand is I understand the flow as I look at the chart, but I don't know where you are in all of that with each of these aging audits. So I just encourage you as a team and all three universities to go back and take a look at everything that's over a year old and really ask those kinds of questions that in the effort to make sure that we're addressing the red issues and the yellow issues, get those things addressed, if nothing else, even if we can't complete the formal audit as was originally envisioned. Does that make any sense, or is that, because I'm kind of shooting in the dark, you know your process better than I do?
So as part, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say that as part of the follow-up process, that's definitely something we look at. I mean, there are times where by the time we finish a follow-up, management may have tried something as originally identified as the appropriate solution at the time of the report, but in fact, that doesn't work. And so it may take longer because they try a new solution. We work out another idea. And in some cases, we do say, this doesn't appear to be pertinent anymore. We would need to subject this to a new audit, or based on information management shared, we might close that item differently, for instance, if it's no longer applicable at all, and we can confirm that.
Okay, fair enough. I know that we see audits canceled from time to time because of other higher priorities. I was just surprised that we had some of them hanging on so long. Is this a common problem you've experienced over the years?
I would say in my case, yes, there's always a few items. When I saw the aging, we hadn't really looked at the aging as well. We knew we had some items that were pretty far out. And when I saw the 15, I was surprised. Most of them, though, you know, there's a lot that are related to the COVID impact, of course, and then a few that deal with the turnover issue and the other issue I had mentioned. So
fair enough. Well, clearly it surprised all of us. So I think it's the changes we made to ask those right questions and take a look is helping all of us to be better focused going forward. And we'll ask the status of those in future meetings as well. Anything else, Mark or Bjorn? Well, thank you both very much. Let's go to the University of Arizona, Lisa Wolney and Sarah Clark. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Thank you, Regent Shootman. I'd like to focus on what's not on our report, because I think that we are probably experiencing a timing issue like maybe NAU and ASU are, and that we're just a few weeks away from the fiscal year end. And as you can see from our reports, we have a lot in process. What you can't see is what we know we will finish by the end of the fiscal year. And that is, we expect to finish 5 reports by the end of the fiscal year. That's the Nike sponsorship agreement, the Nike trademark licensing agreement, security awareness training, the IMG communications agreement, and the facilities management IT general controls. All 5 of those should be issued before the end of the fiscal year, and we'll share those with you at the next audit committee meeting. Our internal audit team has really made good progress in this year with their newer members, despite them being onboarded during remote work. So we're confident that we will see an acceleration in fiscal year 22 with work on this team. And like you mentioned, Regent Shootman, some of our audits were put on hold this year because of the pandemic. We looked at our audit plan and we looked at the units that were really managing our return to campus as well as campus safety. A good example of that is campus health. We really felt like they need to focus on getting, helping our incident command system as well as vaccinating our community. So they'll be added back to fiscal year 22 plan. And then we've also made really good progress this year with follow-ups with our colleagues across campus. And you will see that we have booked 1,400 hours in the fiscal year 22 plan to look at finishing the outstanding items from the fiscal year 21 plan. So in short, the IARB feels very confident in our internal audit team as well as the plan that we've put forward for fiscal year 22.
Sarah?
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Lisa, you did a very nice job covering that summary page. I will comment that if you're comparing this single page to the individual audit plans, you're going to not say, well, everything's not on here. When we were putting this together at the 11th hour, as Lisa mentioned, we had some audits that were postponed or canceled, and I didn't readily see a spot to put those on here. So while those have been detailed on the multi-page or original CAE summary reports that were provided for the April and for this meeting, you'll see them there, but you won't see them up here. So I just wanted to get that out there. As Lisa mentioned, we are making good progress. It seemed for quite a while that the team would be bogged down. Other units were focused on current, what they needed to do to deal with the financial issues related to the pandemic or how we're going to get students back. And so we backed off to allow them to do that work. Of course, when we backed off, that impacted our productivity. But we have noticed with the more return to normal that everyone is experiencing, things are improving quite a bit. We're able to get information from the units under audit, and we're moving along. I think it's been a good learning opportunity for some of our newer staff. And I'm confident that we can proceed to get things done. We don't have any audit reports issued this time. As Lisa mentioned, it's kind of a timing. We're working really hard to get 5 issued by the end of the year. It won't clear this, but it'll be a huge start. And then the 21 audits that looks at on the one-page summary, we did include hours on the 22 plan to conclude those. So we recognize that these audits were important and to mitigate risk and everything, we will continue with those and we will get those addressed. The aging, this is a good way to put it. Thank you for suggesting, because we've never done a chart like this. We provide a detailed listing to the IARB. It talks about what the issues are and where we are and why things haven't been done. We have 7 that are 360 plus. Most of those relate to a proposed policy that's been in the works for, I don't know, Mark, you said 2015 for yours. It's probably every bit as long as that. In the course of doing this, our methodology for coming up and moving new policies through the process to get them approved has changed numerous times. We've had senior leadership changes. The policy involves facilities management, and with the pandemic, Chris got pulled to do the CERT team. So we're still, they're still working on that. I have been tasked with, I could say, being the stick to shepherd this project through. It's been very challenging, but I think we're there. It's to the point, I'm not writing it, but the last communication I had, it was within weeks of being sent to the next phase to get moved forward to to go to senior leadership and the president. So, and that'll clear a lot of those off. There is one red item in the 271 to 360 day category. And the two in that category, one red, one yellow, relates to an ICA business practices audit. I had asked for supporting documentation. The business person advised that the work was done. I said, well, show me something that will tell me that it's done. And they're in there because it took him a while to provide that information. It has been provided. I need to take a look at it, but those items should go away. And then in the 1 to 90 day, there is one red item in there. It relates to our operational advance audit. They're making progress. I checked in with financial services a couple days ago. The new policy's been issued. They're waiting on dashboards and analytics. She said, touch base with me mid-June. I think that'll be done then. So we're making good progress. So I have no further comments on that. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions from the rest of the committee for Sarah or Lisa? What I think is good about what we're seeing today is an opportunity for us to use this tool that we've begun to structure. The one pager may not be the answer, but it definitely is the start. And it looks like it might be something that will help not only the regents better understand where you're at and what we can do to support your work, but also for you internally to take a look at the aging on a regular basis and see what you need to put emphasis on. You know, your IARB are the ones that work with you to forward your audit plans. So that's the opportunity to size the amount of work that you take on based on where you think you are. And I certainly wouldn't take on, 15 new audits if we had 5 years of old ones that we still hadn't finished yet without resolving them. And I'm not saying you're doing that. This is all new for all of us. And I appreciate, Sarah, that all the information, you didn't have a place to really put it on the document, but you can work with Rick and we can make sure that this document now serves everybody's needs. I know I'm confident in our audit teams and I'm confident that they do great work for our universities, but this is an opportunity for us to do it even better and for you to be able to provide the regents the information that they need to feel comfortable and represent you and our universities, not only to the state auditors, but to the general public, that we have our eye on the ball and we're keeping our controls in place to ensure that we're running the kind of operations that we can all be proud of. So don't take it as criticism as much as just an opportunity for all of us to do this a little better. Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's move to Morgan and Lisa.
Yes, thank you, Chair Schupman. I will ask Lisa Grace to give her report, and I will hold any comments I might have until she's done that.
Okay. Very good.
Overall, we've issued audit reports for 8 of our 15 or 14 projects that we have on the plan. So we've issued about 57%. We have 5 additional projects in motion, with 1 project set to kick off in early June, which is an advisory review. So we're making good progress on the plan, but still have a significant amount of work to do. I've submitted 3 reports as part of the materials for today, as well as our standard remediation report that we do to address previously identified audit issues. The first project I'll review is the vulnerability management program that we audited. This is considered a critical risk area for the university based off the potential exposure to ASU's network systems and data. The audit assessed controls related to vulnerability identification, classification, remediation, the related management oversight, as well as logical access, password complexity, and vendor oversight of the third-party platform utilized to manage the program. Overall, we found that controls were not implemented to effectively identify and remediate vulnerabilities within a timely manner within the environment. While a security standard has been implemented and appropriate support services available, the distributed framework that it's managed in is not effective and has really resulted in a low compliance to the remediation requirements of the standard. The audit identified 3 areas of significant areas for improvement, as well as 3 other issues as part of the audit. The first 2 issues are pretty much tied together. Specifically, there's no central governance over the program. So there's a dedicated team that manages the program. They manage the system, the application, they handle the scanning across the university, but then it's up to the different units, whether it's a department IT group or our central UTO technical teams, to actually action and resolve the vulnerabilities that were identified. Because of that lack of governance and oversight, there just has been low compliance in those areas on actually remediating the vulnerabilities. There was also a significant opportunity for improvement noted related to the identification of the vulnerability ownership component. That was primarily due to an outdated asset inventory listing that is required to actually assign the vulnerabilities based off the subnet that it was found on within the network. And so that has resulted in significant rework for the vulnerability management team to identify the owner, which at times may impact the timeliness of the remediation actually occurring. There was also an opportunity for improvement noted related to management reporting and the executive dashboard process in place over this. Specifically, it's excluding information on the timeliness of when remediation is occurring, as well as not providing the actual age of remaining vulnerabilities within the network itself. There were other issues noted related to logical access and vendor oversight over the platform that's utilized as part of the program. Our focus for management remediation plans on this review really focused on those central managed processes through the vulnerability management team that will help overall the program work more efficiently, as well as the specific remediation actions that are owned, so the specific vulnerabilities that are owned by the Central University Technology Office from a technical perspective. Over 90% of the network vulnerabilities would fall to that group, as well as about half of the application vulnerabilities. The management plans that were provided were appropriate. They have short-term tactical responses, including developing a roadmap to address the vulnerabilities within the environment, as well as to replace the platform, which is part of the program or part of the problem with the overall program as far as the application being used to manage the overall process. They are expecting to implement that new system in July, at which time they'll do a full review of the vulnerabilities that are within the environment, internally within UTO, but as well as with all of the departmental owners, to level set, ensure that they're not false positives, which many of them could be, and then move forward with the different process items that they're implementing. Their plan also included longer-term items to address the dashboard reporting aspect, as well as to implement additional governance activities overall. With that, do you want me to pause or do you want me to continue?
Please keep going.
Okay. The second project that was completed was a Itgc review over departmentally managed assets within our Sun Devil Athletics group. We performed this rotational coverage as part of our plan to get coverage over the departmental IT groups, usually focusing on key applications that they're managing within their group. Core risk addressed as part of this audit included logical access, password complexity, vendor oversight, data encryption, as well as the security reviews associated with the underlying applications. We also look to see if disaster recovery information is included for those applications within the continuity of operations plans. The audit identified 5 issues, one which was a significant opportunity for improvement area related to default local administrator level access that had been implemented across the environment within that unit. Local administrator level access would allow individuals the ability to download software, update configuration settings, including those managed by endpoint systems, as well as increases the overall exposure to compromised credentials. Other issues were also noted related to just normal unprivileged logical access, the password complexity, vendor oversight, as well as incomplete continuity of operations plans. The remediation plans provided by the unit were appropriate. Again, they addressed short-term tactical items that they could implement quickly, cleaning up the inappropriate access, updating the continuity plans, collecting the necessary support from the vendors for the vendor oversight requirements. But they also included longer-term process-related items to address it going forward so we can ensure that the environment stays cleaned up as well. The third audit that we did was over the International Students and Scholars Center. This included coverage of controls related to maintaining immigration status for F1 and J1 students. Core risks addressed through this audit included the student support, medical insurance coverage, certification processes and the related reporting, as well as maintaining student records. The audit found that effective controls had been implemented to support the students, as well as to comply with the immigration requirements, although there were 3 opportunities for improvement identified related to record retention, monitoring the student insurance requirements, as well as some of the institutional data included in the certification process. With that, I'll pause and see if you have any updates.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I would just like to comment about the vulnerability management audit that Lisa reviewed with the committee. We did review that audit at IARB in our most recent meeting, and we learned a little bit of a gap in terms of vulnerabilities are being identified and communicated, and management is typically responding. But there's a little bit of a gap in terms of the follow-up and making sure that those vulnerabilities are remediated. The university's chief information security officer does sit on our IARB. She is relatively new to that position. We have asked the director of university audits and the CISO to work together and to implement a system that will allow us to ensure that we close that gap, and if there are areas where appropriate progress isn't being made, that gets brought to the attention of the appropriate senior administrator, whether it's a vice president or a dean, et cetera. And we think that'll improve our ability to close those gaps from where we are today. So we're going to be implementing that immediately.
Morgan, thank you. When you see reds like we're on that report, do you consider maybe the need for structural changes in the management setup? I know you talked about making sure there was somebody responsible for it, but do you have any immediate actions that you take if you see a vulnerability that you consider to be unacceptable for to wait 90 days for it to take place?
Right. Great question. So, with everything that we do, we try to use, a risk assessment approach. And so if there was something that we thought was an immediate high risk, I probably wouldn't even be sitting in this chair. I'd be dealing with that. And other things obviously are not quite as immediately urgent. And, so we do that balancing, and obviously we rely on our internal control system to help us do that. And so for things that we think need to be addressed immediately, we do so. Things that are a little, still not where we'd like them to be, but are a little bit lower risk, we allow more time. Lisa, in a minute, I know will make some comments about our aging, and typically these are issues where a report has been issued with internal audit recommendations. Management has responded with an appropriate plan. And then it's a question of, okay, did the appropriate people follow through and actually fulfill that plan? And so we test based on that. And so there's sort of a full system around that. I would say that in this area, things are not quite where we would like them to be, and that's why we're spending a lot of time on it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that's, in big organizations, it's really easy to do the work, come up with a remediation plan, pass it down to the people who are busy doing other jobs, and it kind of sits on desks for a while. And we know IT is going to be an ongoing problem for all of us for a long time. And so it appears to me that this audit was timely and appropriate, and the one you should have done, because there's quite a bit of work to be done as a result of what the audit reported.
Yeah, thank you, 300%. And, you know, making sure that we've got that kind of tight feedback loop is exactly where we're focused right now.
Right. So I appreciate the fact that you continue to look at IT issues. I think we require one IT audit every cycle, but it is something that we can't probably overdo just because the risks are high. I thought the international student audit was interesting. It was more about, you know, the processes to make sure their healthcare is right and this and that, the other thing. Paid little attention to the vulnerabilities of looking at disclosure and the issues of them seeing only the appropriate kinds of information. I know that's a different audit, but I was kind of looking in there to see if there was any part of that was a link to that.
Yeah, we did do an export control audit last year as part of last year's plan that did cover that specific risk, and it would have included the various controls that fall under that regulation. So this was really a student-focused audit that did not look at that aspect.
Right, and I remember that audit. The only thing I can't remember is, did it look for like the shadow IT issue that we were talking about with NAU, because that's where we end up with servers off the grid and all kinds of other threats that can actually result in a hack or a loss of control of
Sure.
important information.
Yep. It did have some coverage of that, as part of the export control process requires a technical security plan for any of the agreements or projects that have potential risk, whether it requires an ultimate license or not with the state. So part of that audit would have looked at the underlying technical plans, which sometimes it's physical security, sometimes it's server, sometimes it's various, I guess, physical and electronic security measures. However, the review really was focused on the projects that we pulled into the review, and then those, it's a smaller subset that actually had to have those technical plans. But
Right.
that aspect was looked at in the context of that review, just not broad brush across the university, I would say.
Okay. And you had more for us, Lisa?
That is it on the reports themselves. I did just want to add one other comment regarding the vulnerability management and the red issues. I thought that the unit did, as we worked through management responses, that is why they provided more short-term actions to address the immediate need, what could be done immediately. Part of that system implementation was that piece of it. Part of the problem in managing the overall process was just, it was the wrong tool being utilized across the board, not only within our central UTO group, but the departments across the university. So that was an immediate focus to shore that up, which will then help remediation actions be done more efficiently and timely on a go-forward basis.
Great, thank you very much. Members of the committee, does anybody have any comments for any of our three teams, particularly ASU at this point? Questions about what you've heard or read in the book? Lisa, did I cut you off? Did you have something else?
Nope, I still just have an update on our open remediation items as well.
Yes.
Just as part of our issue management.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm pushing us ahead too fast. Go ahead, please.
So the other part of our audit activity is just reassessing the previously identified audit issues, as we talked about. We do track issues from the time we issue the report until we formally close it. So alluding to Rick's comments at the start of our meeting, our new one-page summary count includes both those items that are still open, that management is planning on or still working on implementing their actions, as well as those that they've implemented their management plans and we've just not yet tested to close out the issue. So that is in that overall number. Of the issues that we have greater than a year, 10 are still open that are in that bucket. Of those, progress has been being made by management to address the issues. They're actively engaged in doing it. There's various reasons why they're still open, but it is not lack of management engagement to resolve the issues. From just a high level perspective, we have a chemical inventory issue related to the process and systems used to track chemicals across the university. That item is being addressed from an end-to-end process perspective at an enterprise level, really looking at central receiving and storage, as well as replacing the application that manages that process. So as that effort has went through the process development, that it is a longer term process. They did have to reset it twice just because of their planned actions not working as intended because of the necessary integration. They now believe that they have implemented or that they have developed the appropriate solution and are working towards doing the funding process to actually implement it. So progress is being made on that. There's one issue related to our strategic partner related to Olympus, related to out-of-scope invoicing. This isn't a high-risk area. I just wanted to bring it up as an example that it is open. We issued the report, they implemented their plan, we tested it and found that the plan that what they had implemented just didn't address the full risk. So at that point, we will reopen the issue and we just continue aging it from the original audit still because that risk is in our environment still. So that was one of the items. So at times that may happen as well. There's 4 issues related to our study abroad audit that was done last year. While progress has been made over implementing their plans, they just still have actions to go. This was one group that was definitely impacted by having resource constraints over this past year's environment. The last bucket of items are related to a firewall audit that are, again, are more process-related items that are involving policy decisions regarding our change management and our system logging policies that are just longer in nature as far as to address and then implement what is being addressed. For this quarter, we did complete remediation testing on 6 previously identified issues. Nothing really to discuss of interest on that. We did also put a significant focus on remediation testing this quarter and are expecting to close out an additional 23 issues by the end of the fiscal year as part of our 4th quarter remediation report. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions from anybody on the committee? Morgan, while we have you, as you look at this and see the complexity that Lisa deals with and the scope of all of this, do you feel like the IARB as it's constructed and has the bandwidth, and the university has the bandwidth to keep up with all of this at the demand level that it presents?
Yeah, great question. I think that generally the answer would be yes. You know, there are peaks of activity at times. It's been a busy year for everybody. I think everyone's felt like they have sort of 2 full-time jobs, but I think we're managing through that pretty well. The University Audit Office is fully staffed and has been for the majority of the year. My personal opinion is that Lisa's done a great job in terms of recruiting, really strong professionals with the right credentials, et cetera. So I feel like we have a good team there. We focus our IARB, the way we organize it, to ensure that there are people who are pretty conversant, with finance and business management issues, and are also positioned within their organizations to be able to identify things that may, be applicable to their areas, even though an audit finding may really be about some other unit. And we think that's part of being a continuous learning organization. And, ideally, they will take that information back and they'll look at what they're doing in a particular unit and maybe address some things before it comes to an audit and sort of bypass this whole cycle that Lisa was talking about, which is great because then there's a little bit less work for everybody to do. We do benchmark as well in terms of resources, for the University Audit Office, and I think at this point, with a fully staffed office, which I think is a well-run office, I feel like we're where we need to be. You could always do a little bit more, with additional resources, but I feel like we compare well to other institutions. And so we'll continue to watch that. And if we feel that is no longer the case, we'll make adjustments.
Okay, appreciate the report. And Lisa, I didn't ask that question of you or Bjorn. Do you have any concerns about the construct of your IARB? Do you feel like you have the right people around the table and the ability to keep up with all that Sarah and her team produce?
Absolutely. We have the members of our senior executive team. And like Morgan, we have folks who are focused on business and finance. And our IARB members really take this seriously. We have great conversations about strategic risks, and people come well prepared for conversations and to support Sarah. One thing that I would mention is that, we've talked with Sarah about any time that she or her team run into an issue with a follow-up where they aren't getting traction with the department, to please connect with any member of the IARB who can help move things forward.
No, that's great. And we're so pleased that Sarah has a full team finally. So for a couple of years there, we were scrambling shorthanded. So very good. Bjorn, back to you for the same question quickly, and then we'll move on.
Sure. Thanks, Chair Schutman. Our IARB is our executive team, so certainly cross-divisional discussions, as Morgan noted. A lot of the audits touch or have results that impact other areas. So having that discussion and awareness is really helpful and important. And I think the structure is right. I do think in terms of the follow-up process that we do have, Mark and I continue to tweak that. And one of the things that we implemented this spring was quarterly follow-ups for vice presidents of outstanding items. So that is something that we had implemented earlier this spring to address that, so that we do have that visibility at the senior administration team of anything that is outstanding. So, it is something that we can continually evaluate and adapt to in terms of how we can drive and close items out.
Thank you very much. I hope that the rest of the committee feels as I do, that having both our CFOs and our chief auditors at the table together for us to discuss this with is really value added. We get a better and clearer perspective of not only the audit work, but the response to it. And so I want to thank all three of the university teams for their presentations on all of this. So that concludes the IARB and Chief Auditor's reports. We are now going to go to the Internal Auditors FY 2022 Annual Audit Plans. This is agenda item 6, 7, and 8, which can contain those proposed plans. We'll start with Sarah, then go to Lisa, and finish with Mark. So Sarah?
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, just a comment, please.
Yes,
I really think what you've done in your work with Rick and John to produce the kind of different view of the audit process is really valuable to us. And to me, it exposes some questions that I'd like to, if, with your permission, go to John for just a moment and ask John about his kind of perspective on the efficaciousness of our audit processes at this point, and whether he has some recommendations or some further work to do to really analyze the efficaciousness of those processes.
Thank you, Chair Penley. John?
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the question, Chair Penley. Over the last few years, we've made two key changes to our audit processes. Number one, we implemented the IARB that was really designed to marry the audit process with the management process, and the feedback we've had from the universities, I think, has been universally positive. Rick sits on the IRB committees for each of the universities, so that gives us that direct insight into what those processes look like. And from what we understand from both the management side and the audit side, that process is working very well, and that the management teams are being served by that audit process. So that was part one. Part two is we wanted to make sure that the audit committee had insight on what's going on at the audit level, and was getting a good report and a good sense of how effective those audits have been, and that management is implementing those. And as Regent Schutman noted in his opening remarks, that really focuses around 4 areas, and so we redesigned the reports and the meeting structure on that. I think we've identified in this meeting some areas where we can improve on those reports, and so we'll get back to them and work on that. I think the next iteration of the audit committee is going to be around risk management. That really takes this committee to that next level. Each of the universities has an internal risk identification process. You're going to see some of that in just a minute as we go through the heat maps and the establishment of their next year's audit plans. But the committee so far isn't really connected into that risk management process. So what we are looking at is carving out time next year during the audit committee to have the university risk managers come one at a time, and in a combination of public and executive sessions, really talk to the board about the risk areas that they see in the universities, and to make sure that we and the universities have the appropriate processes in place to really look at and manage risk. So hope that answered your question. That's kind of where we're at.
I think those were good comments, Chair Penley, and John, I agree completely with what you said. Taking on the risk element is important based on what the state auditors discussed with us, and I do think that it makes it more in the front of mind that we really are dealing with risk in all of our conversations that we have. But this will put the title risk on a committee and allow us to do it in at least one concentrated area from time to time as we meet. So let's go now and look at our 2022 audit plans. Sarah, are you ready for that presentation?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. You'll find in the materials our audit plan presentation for the FY22 audit plan. Similar to years past, we utilized the 5-year or the multi-year planning document as a tool to look at what we identified as risk areas in the past and identify deficiencies, new items that have come to play. The IARB meeting, really good discussion about risks. It's nice to have all those different senior leaders in the room at the same time to talk about, and they freely share information. So normally I would go to the UROC, the risk identification, but they didn't meet last year. So what we did is we looked at the 5-year plan, what's coming down the pike, what should we add? We did include foreign disclosure in FY25. We had a really good discussion in the IARB, and while it is a high-risk area coming down the pike, it's not ready for audit yet, so we pushed it out to 25. But what we are doing is our high-level review of COC and COI we added a small component of foreign influence in there as well. And that's on the current audit plan that we're working on right now. So there is a little bit addressed in there. With the new financials modernization project, we included hours in there for our certified information systems auditor to participate in that project to identify if there's any areas to mitigate risk, to ensure internal controls are built in rather than having to come back after the fact and try to implement. So we think that'll be some time well spent for the next couple of years to have that IT auditor embedded in that process. As has been mentioned before, the 22 plan does include hours to complete some of the higher risk 21 audits that won't have been completed by the end of the fiscal year. And while the list here of proposed new 22 audits might look a little aggressive, given the amount of work still needing to be done, and it is, I'll say that it is, but it's better to reach higher, I think, than to not have enough and people perform accordingly. During the IARB meetings, this whole year, we've talked about ways that maybe the team can work a little bit differently, do things differently. And so we're looking forward to implementing some of those process changes as we move forward into these new audits. We are anticipating remaining fully staffed. We never know, but we're going to assume that we are. So with that, they get their 10 holidays, 22 vacation days, 12 sick days. And we've also allocated 100 hours per employee for continuing education, which is critical so that they can remain current and better enable them to perform audits on the plan. I guess I'm going to stop in the interest of time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
So for those that may not have looked at that list, how many audits are on your FY22 plan?
Well, let's follow.
And a number of those are makeup from this year, and we canceled a couple and focused in on the rest. Has everybody looked at this in your board book? It's an important part of service on this committee to take a look at these things because they're organized in a way that you can really see what the plan is. And then we can ask Sarah and Lisa if we have any clarifying questions about the overall plan. Lisa, I'm sorry. Sarah, do you have anything else to add about the plan, concerns, or things that the board committee should know?
I don't have any concerns about the plan.
Okay. All right, super. We will then, yes, Lyndall. Regent Manson, sorry.
No, I'm trying to find my mute button again. It never moves. I don't know why I can't find it. I want to question, so 12 new audits plus 12 new audits or 12 audits that include things that were delayed from last year. And then we have how many open items? I'm concerned that we're putting more on the plate than we can chew and ends up just kind of adding to this grouping of things that we don't finish in the time frame that we initially planned to.
Mhm.
And so that we have more items that are open, a longer period in time. And my concern goes, across all three schools, because I think this was the first indication that I actually had of how much was still open from previous audits. And I just want to make sure that we aren't exacerbating the problem.
I appreciate the comment, Regent Manson. One of the process improvements that I think will make the team more efficient is rather than individual auditors working on projects, to do a team approach to perform the audits. I think that is going to move us along a little bit better than what we've been doing. It will also increase knowledge, so that particular knowledge will be focused on a single individual, but it'll give a broader to the team. And so that was one of the key processes that we're looking to change. And given that, I'm confident on this plan, even though I know there's a lot there still outstanding. But a lot of that that's outstanding is just the final. And I think that with the concerted effort, and we have these summer months where there's no meetings, and that's really our work and a time for us to really dig in and get some more accomplished than we can do otherwise. And I'm confident on this one.
Okay.
Jump in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I share Regent Manson's concern, Sarah, that this may be way too aggressive in light of what's already on your agenda. And another concern I have is the lack of an IT audit that I think may be important for security purposes, unless I'm missing something here. And I'll go back to what Mark explained to us earlier about the shadow IT. We know from the Auditor General's last report on IT that the university had significant issues of IT security. My guess is one of those vulnerable areas remains shadow IT around the campus. So I guess I would ask you what needs to be done to really look at IT, whether it's shadow IT or some other security issue. And at the same time, I'm not asking that we add more. I'm asking that we take things away because of my concern and the concern that Regent Manson has.
Well, Regent Penley, one of the FY21 audits that we have yet, that we will be working on, is a general control review and a decentralized IT unit. So there is that will be forthcoming. The financial modernization project having the auditor embedded on that to mitigate any risk, ensure controls are in place. That will help IT security when the system is implemented. We are also finding that many units and even the university as a whole have agreements with third parties to provide cloud-based service and our product, which impacts IT security as well. And we do have audits of those agreements or contracts included on the plan. One a year. We've got the one with Oracle to be completed for this year, and then we'll determine one for next year as well. For next year, we've got the admissions cloud-based providers, which was identified during our admissions work. While it's not IT security in a decentralized unit, as more and more is outsourced to these cloud-based providers, our risk could increase there as well.
If I may comment, Mr. Chairman, thanks, Sarah, for that explanation. But I guess I'd turn to Lisa Rolney, Vice President Rolney, or to President Robbins on this one, because You, President Robbins, have really made the transformation of IT an issue, and a needed one, by the way, at the university. And I'm wondering, in order to advance that strategic initiative that you have, is there some other kind of audit on IT that's really important to you that will drive the institution forward along with the strategy that you've outlined?
Well, I would defer to Sarah and Lisa on this. The thing that I'm most concerned about is the decentralization of all the servers that we have around campus. But I think, there's a methodological approach to getting at that. It may not be in this year's plans, but that's something that's always concerning to me.
The very reason why I raised the shadow IT issue.
If I may add, Regent Penley, Barry Brummond, our CIO, sits on IARB, and he is a very active participant on IARB and has worked with Sarah to follow up on all the IT security audit findings from previous issues, and has worked with us to select the IT security vendor contract for this year. So I think if Barry were here, he would say that he feels confident in the plan that we've put forward for 22.
Okay, very, very well. I think you've heard a couple of the committee members' concerns. When you have to roll 5 of this year's audits into next year, it calls into question whether you really have the bandwidth you think you have. And we trust you to take a hard look at this. Again, what I said earlier in the meeting was, you're doing this to yourself. And we appreciate that, because I think it's very important that you do look at as many things as you can, but not to the exclusion of doing it in a timely manner and making sure that all the follow-up is done, and that you really can put one to bed, at some point in a reasonable amount of time and take on the next. So good discussion today, food for thought for all 3 teams as we go back now and think about this 2022 plan. 8,869 hours, Sarah, you're going to be busy. That's a lot of hours.
It is a lot of hours.
Okay, very good. Let's move on then. Let's see, who's left? Oh, I think that must be Lisa for your 2022 plan.
Great. So our FY 2021 risk assessment followed our established process and was a year of the full assessment, including the survey portion that goes across the key stakeholders of the university. The survey is intended to obtain feedback based off of the 10 risk measures that we've defined within our risk assessment. They include significance to strategic goals, financial impact of control failure, management oversight, the adequacy of internal controls, human resources, operations complexity, legal and regulatory exposure, as well as factoring in the level of external oversight. So we went through that process. As far as key stakeholders go, we obtain feedback from senior leaders across the university, as well as each of the IRB members, as well as university audit. And then we use those results to come up with a risk rating for each of our auditable units that is either critical, high, medium, or low, which then help drive our audit cadence when we're creating the audit plan. We also assess the audit universe for completeness. This year's assessment, we identified one auditable unit that I felt was missing related to our experience center. We also broke out one unit into 2 standalone units. We had tax and global operations grouped together. Because of the different risk thresholds of those 2 groups, we did separate those 2. We also removed one unit, third-party housing, which will just be incorporated into the existing unit for university housing. I had comprehensive risk discussions with key leaders across the university, as well as each of the IRB members, as well as Regent Schutman. I also factor in our own team's knowledge of the control environment across the university, the various committees that we sit in, as well as independent research on risks and trends. All of these activities then feed into summarizing the key risk considerations that we utilized in creating our audit plan. Those are summarized as operational risks, financial risks, compliance risks, and information technology risks. These are summarized in the risk assessment document that I submitted as part of the materials. These were discussed in detail as part of our RIB our internal audit review board meeting, not only focusing on the risks, but high-level control areas across the university addressing those risks, as well as our planned audit coverage for FY22, as well as looking back 3 years to show where we had audit coverage in those areas as well. Our audit assumptions really stayed consistent from prior years. We dedicate about 55% of our time to core audit projects, and that means a discrete assurance project, advisory project, or audit follow-up, our remediation testing that we do on a quarterly basis. The remaining time represents our holiday and PTO time, training, hotline management, our ongoing quality assurance program. We also allocated the equivalent of 2 projects to our data analytics program this year, really to strengthen that and to continue to develop that. It needs some dedicated resources. As a result, we have 14 projects planned. It's 12% financial projects, 35% operational projects, 29% IT, and the remaining 24% focused in compliance areas. The 2 financial projects are both assurance reviews. One is over SDA operations, focusing on coaching contracts. Second one is an accounts payable audit focused on RPA functionality that was implemented related to our invoice processing within Workday. We have 5 operational projects included. 3 are assurance projects, 2 are advisory. We have a student employment audit focused or plan that is focused on assessing controls both within our student employment office as well as the hiring department. We have a contracting and service agreement audit planned that will focus on managing the contractual terms of the agreement, both from a vendor perspective as well as our contract administrator side here at the university. We have a strategic partner audit planned, which we do annually. This year, we're planning on focusing on our agreement with High-Tech, who manages many of our IT services across the university. That audit is not intended to be a technical audit. It will really look at the financial provisions, service level agreements, and compliance to ASU policy and procedures. We have a Thunderbird business review advisory project focused or planned. This will be focused on assessing the financial structure and operations of the unit, including how we utilize the 501c3 units. And then we have 1 placeholder project, which we normally allocate for audit requests that come in throughout the year. We have 3 projects planned for compliance. We have an NCAA compliance audit focusing on coaches, camps, and clinics. That was actually moved from last year's audit since the camps didn't occur. We have a grants and contracts focused audit that will look at unit managed sponsored projects. And then we have a HIPAA privacy advisory audit planned to assess our structure for HIPAA privacy across the university according to best practices. Then we have 4 IT audit projects planned, 2 assurance and 2 advisory. We have a wireless security audit really focused on endpoint security that was moved from last year's plan as well. We have a follow-up vulnerability management audit. So as I mentioned when I was reviewing the audit, our initial audit this year really focused on our centrally managed pieces of that. The audit we have scheduled for next year based off of the process improvements being made to the program will really focus on the departmental managed components of that program. We have an endpoint management advisory planned, which will focus on assessing the units across the university that will look at various endpoint management aspects, how they pull data, push configuration out to the different devices, use of standard imaging and their refresh cadences. And then we have a physical security advisory review focused on student residence halls. With that, I'll pause and I'm happy to answer any questions on our risk assessment or our proposed plan.
It was a good report. Makes me tired to listen to it, but I appreciate the level of look that you're taking. Any questions on Lisa's report from anyone? we're at the point where we're supposed to vote to forward these 2022 plans to the full board for approval in 2 weeks. I want to ask the 3 CFOs, do you want to have the opportunity to take one last look and perhaps make any adjustments? We can vote with that caveat, I suspect. Bjorn?
Mark needs to present the NAU plan.
Oh yeah, Mark, you're hard to forget, man. I'm sorry. I really have been looking at the clock. I'm sorry, but I do want the 3 CFOs to think about this while Mark is reporting and let us know if you think you want to take one last look at your plans. Mark, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No need to be sorry. I just assumed you looked at it, thought it was fine, and we would move on.
Well, I actually did, but I want to hear you say it anyway.
So, obviously, as has been discussed, there was some COVID impact on our enterprise risk management process. So the data survey and interview process did not occur in spring 20, but we did pick up and continue this past spring. And while we're still continuing to analyze the data and how it impacts the entire NAU risk profile, it was sufficient to determine what we should audit. And so that information's in the plan. 2 of the major risk items we know are related to the continuing impact of COVID and, of course, our president transition. And in both cases, they include both challenge and opportunity risk. It's not all bad. We know we have some great opportunities ahead, and we're certainly looking forward to those. So when we pull the information together, we develop a potential project list for the coming plan year. We submit that to vote for the full executive team in this case, because our IARB is in fact the full executive team. And then based on those votes, we identify the audits that float to the top. And in many cases that works very well and continues to do so. And this year we had unanimous selection of a consulting project focused on business process efficiencies. So one of the continuing ERM risks that have been identified is the fact that our processes in many cases are not agile enough. And given where the competitive environment is going for the universities, across the nation and certainly in Arizona, we want to make sure that we are identifying those processes and eliminating barriers, inefficiencies, and perhaps even saying, are we over-controlled in some cases? So the goal is to identify a lot of key processes and then map and analyze those processes to identify ways to improve efficiency and agileness going forward. So the resulting plan, we have 5 audits and 3 consulting projects. IT security, we have not yet scoped. We're wrapping up our IT security right now, which is focused on network domain and some domain management and email management. So what we will do is when we get to the point of probably Q3 of FY22, we'll look at the latest state of the security team's IT risk assessment, along with where we are with the developing ERM process, and then we will select based on the risk as it's seen at that time. And then of course, IT security is something we also have in the cyclical plan, so we want to keep that. Likewise, we have a research project focused on indirect costs and facility and administrative costs. That continues a focus we believe is important because of all the risks associated with research and how much we've built up research over the past several years. Making sure that we're in compliance with various federal and other award restrictions. So the consulting projects I mentioned, business process efficiency, we're also have one focused on data integrity and looking at a lot of our data issues. Again, in some ways they'll tie together, but they'll also look at data concerns as well. And then we'll continue our fraud risk assessment process, which we think is going to be a multi-year process, so that we expect to see a lot of work achieved in the coming year. We are on our 4th year of the 4-year NCAA compliance audit cycle we do, which is an off year, so we will not be auditing NCAA compliance. However, we will be auditing the construction of the Athletics Performance Center, which is in progress now. And then we're also have been working on a special project focused on how we manage tuition waivers here, and a big part of that relates to the tuition waiver processing for non-student athletes that are employed to support various business functions in athletics. So I know I didn't cover every specific piece, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Regent Schupman.
Regent Schutman, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Good report. Comments from anyone? Seeing none, this is the opportunity of CFOs. If you want to say anything, you're welcome to. Hearing none, then I move that the committee approve the fiscal year 2022 audit plans as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. This was a very interesting and enlightening day with the audit committee, I think. So we have more to do. So I think we're ready to move to the next item here. We're going to now go into executive session. So I want to remind you that we need to go back to that executive session Zoom number that we used earlier. And the participants for executive session are the regents, the ABOR executive director and staff as designated by Director Arnold, and the university chief audit executives. I move that we convene in executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll see you back on the executive Zoom.
Who would you like to do? Who would you like to do first?